Hi. Okay, so some of you guys I imagine would have read about ECGs and heart rhythms, and you probably read and kind of thought, I still don't get it. And if that's you, and I asked you to interpret this 12-lead ECG, you'd probably give me some sort of fluffy answer and kind of go, oh, I'm not sure where to start, I can see this or whatever. But if you're looking at this ECG now, and you know how to interpret it, then don't watch the video. Forget it, all right? But if that's you, where you're kind of going, oh, I'm just not sure where to start, that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about where to start when you're actually doing things like interpreting a 12-lead ECG. So let me just start off by explaining to you, and look, my apologies if you find this really, really basic. I don't mean to be condescending, but I'm just trying to talk to a large group of people that may not understand ECGs. All right. So if you came into hospital and I wanted to do some cardiac monitoring on you, I would put 3 leads on you. So those of you that have come to hospital or even had an operation or whatever would have had some cardiac monitoring, which means that I would put a lead here and a lead here and a lead down here. And then I would attach that to an ECG monitor and it would capture an electrical event. All right, so I want to explain to you the electrical event that it's going to capture. So this is a picture of the heart, and there's 4 chambers to the heart. Okay, so this is the right side and that's the left side of the heart. So we're looking at the right atrium now. And in the right atrium, you have a sinus, a hole. Okay, and inside that hole are these cells that can generate electricity, and they fire off electricity. Now, when you read about this, it tells you where the electricity goes. I just want to simplify it and tell you where the electricity ends up. The electricity goes from this node here, and it has to go somewhere, and it ends up going here. And this node here, right, is situated between the atriums and the ventricles. So we call it the atrioventricular node. And this node is like the gateway from the atrium to the ventricles. So this is how it works. The sinoatrial node, which is here, the SA node, right? They call it a sinoatrial node because, one, it's a sinus and it's situated in the atrium, so they call it a sinoatrial node, but I'll just call it an SA node. Okay, so the SA node fires off electricity to here, and we can capture that electrical event, and it looks like this. Okay, so once it hits the AV node, like on the AV node, an electrical current hits me, I'm now the gateway, and I send an electrical pathway to the ventricles. Okay, so when I send the electrical pathway to the ventricles just go, oh, like this, right? And it contracts and it spits out blood. And I'm just going to draw it like this. I'm going to draw it like this, okay? And I'm going to draw 2 sort of vectors or currents that go down the left ventricle, because the left ventricle is huge. Like if I was to draw it to scale, it would be so much larger. And then one goes down the right. And if I can capture that electrical event too with those 3 leads, and it would look like this. And then the electricity kind of finishes, okay? And when it finishes, the heart everything just resets, okay? And when it resets, it also looks like this. So if I was to name them, it's really simple. Like I would just call this a P wave, and I didn't name them, someone else named them. And it's a good name, right? So that's a P wave, that's a Q wave there, and that's an R wave, an S, and T. And I know that you guys would have heard about PQRST. And that's what the electrical current is. But this is where I start to lose you. So when I talk about this in class, people kind of phase out. So this is what I want to do. I want to explain to you that electrical event, and I want to convert that into a mechanical event. All right, so this is your heart pumping now. Okay, so this is the atrium and this is the ventricles. And this is what happens. It does this, right? So now let me translate this mechanical event into the electrical event with these letters. And it goes like this. It goes P, QRS, T, P, QRS, T, P, QRS, T. And that's how your heart pumps, every beat, okay? So now we've kind of married up a mechanical event to an electrical event. So I want to show you this because this is the rhythm that we look at. We monitor this in lead 2, and I'll explain to you what lead 2 is, right? But the electrical event gives us a picture, and I want to actually just marry that mechanical event to the electrical event. And so I don't know if you can see this, but can you see this wave here before every QRS complex as a P wave? So when we're looking at cardiac rhythms, one of the first things that we look at is that we look for the presence of the P wave, because the P wave tells us that the sinoatrial node is working, and it should be. That's its job, okay? So I'm going to convert that into a mechanical event now, right? So PQRST, and that's how it pumps, okay? Okay, so that's all well and good, okay? Now, I want to go back to a little bit of sciencey sort of stuff, okay? And I'm going to draw some cardiac tissue for you, all right? So I'm going to draw some cardiac tissue. Let's say the cardiac tissue is somewhere here, all right? So I'm going to draw this, okay? Electricity likes to go from A to B, right? So a normal heart muscle will actually pass an electrical current from A to B, and that's captured somewhat in an ECG. But what if I took a piece of cardiac muscle that died, just a piece of cardiac muscle, and now the cardiac muscle is dead? The ability to pass electricity through that dead cardiac muscle is altered, it changes. And the electrical current looks like this. It sort of does something like this, okay? So, where this is normal, PQRST, right? I want to draw this for you in an ECG form. It's going to look like this. So can you see how the ST wave is low? It's down, it's depressed, okay? They call that ST depression. And what that means is that the patient has had a heart attack in the past. So that's telling us some history. And I'm just going to write the history sign because that's telling us that has happened in the past. Now this is where things get a little bit weird, and you have to believe me, all right? Because there's no scientific explanation as to why this happens. But let's say, for example, I took this heart muscle and I choked it for a while of oxygen, and it's not dead, but it's dying, okay? The tissue that's dying has an altered ability to pass electricity through it. We don't know why, but it does sort of this. And if we do a 12-lead ECG, right, we can actually see that, and it looks like this. So that's your P wave, QRS. Can you see how your T wave is higher? Okay, we call that ST elevation. And ST elevation means that they're having a heart attack now. And we have to recruit that cardiac muscle. We have to recruit that cardiac muscle to have more oxygen running to it. Otherwise it will die. It will go from this to this. And we don't want heart muscle to die, okay? Because it can't regenerate itself like other muscles can. Okay, we want to preserve it. So that's why they say things like time is muscle. So when you do a 12-lead ECG and somebody comes in with pain, we can determine whether that pain is old heart pain or whether it's new heart pain, okay? So I just wanted to go over 12-lead, ECGs with you on what's happening from an electrical point of view, right? And I want to push you a little bit further. So by now, if you kind of think, okay, well, he's being a bit too basic or whatever, then turn the video off. But if you want to now go into 12-lead ECGs, I want to talk to you about that, all right? So I'm going to rub this out, because you already know this probably. So I want to explain something. Okay. So let's say that this is the heart, right? And those 3 leads that I put on you, right, is looking at an angle of the heart like this, okay? So that's kind of like your selfie angle, okay? The selfie angle is called lead 2, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But when we do a 12-lead ECG, this is what we're actually doing. So what we're doing with normal ECGs, we're putting 3 leads, but with a 12-lead ECG, this is what we're doing. We're putting one camera here, and we're putting another camera here, and we're doing that around the heart, right? So we're putting all these different cameras around the heart, and then it's kind of like we're pressing record, and we're going to record how the heart's moving from these different angles. So it makes sense that if I'm looking at one particular lead at the same thing, it's going to look different. In fact, one of the leads does this. It's looking at it upside down. I'll talk about that lead later, all right? So the leads mean something. So if I take you back to this 12-lead ECG, and I'll even make the picture a little bit bigger. Okay, this is what it's telling us. This 12-lead ECG is telling us that, hey John, I've taken a picture of the heart with different cameras. So this lead 2 is the selfie lead, and you'll notice that it gives us a longer strip. So you see how this one's shorter? So that's one lead, another lead, another lead. This lead here is the entire length of the 12-lead ECG. It's doing that to give us time to determine what rhythm the patient's in, all right? But it's just the selfie lead, it's not telling us everything. This is now telling us everything, all right? So see these numbers here and these letters, they actually mean something, and that's what I want to sort of go back to. I'll go back to this, but I just want to show you what leads mean what. So if I take you over here to my crappy picture of the heart, the leads mean something, and I need to look at the 12-lead ECGs all the time. Okay, I forget which leads are what, I need to look at it to remind me, all right? So there's a lead called lead 1, and there's a lead called AVL. So 1 and AVL, your literature will tell you that it looks at a certain part of the heart. I'm going to simplify it for you, right? By doing my simple drawing, just to help you kind of understand things, all right? So 1 and AVL looks at the top part of the heart. So they'll call that the high lateral part of the heart. So we will call that our high lateral leads. So I won't write the word leads, I'll just say it's high lateral. So that's an important part of the heart, yeah, because that's where all our plumbing goes in, a lot of our plumbing goes into the top part of the heart. So it's a pretty important part of the heart, all right? Now I want to actually talk about lead 2. Remember, lead 2 is our selfie lead, and on the ECG you'll see lead 2 appear twice. It's important, it's our selfie one, right? It's what we put on our Instagram sort of profile pics or whatever. So we've got lead 2, lead 3, and we've got lead AVF. And what that does, that looks at the outside part of the heart. So let me just put this into context. If God said to me, John, you need to have a heart attack, I will say, okay, I'll have a heart attack, but can I have it on the outside part of my heart where it's not so important? And okay, so it's not as important. All your heart muscles are important, but some are more important than others. So that's why we call these the inferior leads. So 2, 3, and AVF, they're our inferior leads. Right? Now this is where things start to get interesting, okay? Because you'll notice on the ECGs that they now are actually talking about V leads, all right? So V1, and apologies for the squeaking, and V2, they're our septal leads. So what does our septum do? Our septum is a very important structure of our heart. It keeps, oxygenated blood away from deoxygenated blood. But what the septum also does, it kind of plays a bit of a role in our ejection fraction too. So when our left ventricle fills, part of our septum has some elasticity that's going to kind of pull it back into place and give us a bit of an ejection fraction, which is all we're really sort of saying. It's going to give us a systolic blood pressure. So we don't want any damage done to those. Okay, so if I see any of this pathology in these leads, I'm going to start to worry. Okay, and this is really important here. V3 and V4, they're here, they're at the front of our heart, so they're our anterior leads. So V1, V2, septal, V3 and V4 is our anterior, right? We don't want to have any damage there, right? Because look where it is, that's where all our valves are, all right? So if you have an anterior infarct, it means that, you might damage your valves and they won't be efficient to, help you pump blood around, because valves are important, right, in any context. So we don't want damage done there. And then we've got V5 and V6, and V5 and V6 are the lower lateral parts of your heart. So V5 and V6, right, that's a pretty chunky sort of area of our heart, isn't it, right? So we don't want any damage done there as well, because that's kind of like, the bulk of our muscle, our left ventricle, okay? So let's recap. Remember what we said. ST depression means that the patient had a heart attack before. ST elevation means that they're having a heart attack now. Now we actually understand this, all right? So I get my students to take a picture of this, right? Because this is what they'll use to kind of look at a 12-lead ECG when they forget, well, what part of the heart am I looking at, all right? So now let me take you back to these ECGs here. So the process of looking at a 12-lead ECG is this. You obviously look at the patient's name and the date and all that sort of stuff. And once you do that, you then look at the rhythm, okay? Once you determine that the patient is in a sinus rhythm, why? Because the sinoatrial node is working, and we know that because the presence of P waves, right? Now we're actually going to have a look at the ECG from the leads point of view, from the angle point of view. So they're the high lateral leads, and remember, the PQRS complex is going to look different. Why? Because we're looking at a different angle of the heart. We're looking at the same thing at a different angle, all right? So that doesn't seem to have any ST elevation or any ST depression, so I'd say that's unimpressive. Same as the inferior leads, there's nothing happening here, right? Now let's look at the septal leads. So we can actually see that there's some T-wave inversion right there, right? So we can also see some T-wave inversion there. So we might think, well, maybe the patient might have had some cardiac problem in the past. Okay, it's not elevation, they're not having a heart attack now. That may be an indication of some damage before, okay? Then we look at their anterior leads here, all right? And anterior leads, well, there could be some anterior lead sort of involvement here, which means that, there's an anteroseptal kind of suspicion that's going on. So that's V3 and V4, sorry. Okay, so V3 and V4, but look, having a look at the anterior leads, the anterior leads are quite normal here. So, I don't think there's a suspicion of the anterior leads at all, maybe the septal leads. But then we look at 5 and 6, that's normal too. So let me show you, stay on there, I'll show you an abnormal ECG. So if I was to show you this ECG at the beginning of the video and you'd said, I'm not sure, and I'm showing you this ECG now after watching this short period and spending this short period of time with me, I hope that you can see some pathology in this ECG. All right, so let's go through the process. Normal sinus rhythm. Something sus going on there, but I can't diagnose on one lead, all right? So I need 12 leads. So looking over at this, look at this. We have ST elevation here. What does ST elevation mean? It means the heart muscle is dying, all right? We can't diagnose on one lead, so we need to look at the partnering lead, which is this. And the partnering lead is telling us the same thing. So the patient is having a high lateral myocardial infarction. We're doing something about this now, right? People are now running around doing something about this patient. In the meantime, we're just going to stay with this ECG. We're just going to look at the inferior leads now. Okay, there's nothing really sus happening here. There's some unusual markings here. It looks like there's some ST depression that's happening down here. And it looks like there's some ST depression happening here. So this is an old infarct, which kind of makes sense. If a patient presents having a myocardial infarction, chances are that they've had a heart attack before in the past because they've got coronary arterial disease. Causes of coronary arterial disease, you know, all right? So, so we've looked at the high lateral, we've looked at the inferior leads, and now we're going to look at the septal leads and have a look at the septal leads. We've got ST elevation here, and we've got significant ST elevation here. So the patient is having a septal infarct as well. The patient is kind of having some ST elevation in lead 3 and lead 4, and 5 and 6 is normal. Okay, so what we could call this, and there's other ways of naming these ECGs, is that the patient is having a septolateral infarct. Okay, so that's, look guys, this was a crash course in how to look at 12-lead ECGs. There's so much more to it, okay? I might do one on cardiac rhythms a little bit later, but I just wanted to get you started to feel confident in looking at 12-lead ECGs, looking at things like ST depression and ST elevation. So I'll do another series on cardiac rhythms, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the heart's doing at certain points when the heart's misbehaving and having arrhythmias. But that's a video for another day. So thanks for joining me. I hope that helps.